to work on hand tightening the bolts for the Apogee to make sure it's connected to the pole correctly and it's not going to move, because we're going to work on the fine tuning of the configuration inside of Apogee Manager, which you can access through your phone or through your laptop or through your or a wireless configuration team that you want to work with. However you want to do it, you can access Apogee Manager a number of ways. So we're going to work on the orientation. We're going to make sure that the Apogee is oriented to north. We're going to work on the azimuth. We're going to make sure you're as close to 0 degrees to the horizon as possible. And we're going to work on your coverage area. So we're going to make sure that the quadrants that Apogee you turn on cover the areas that you want it to cover. So you've already got your Apogee hand tightened, and now it's time to connect it to the access point. So what we're going to do is connect the RJ45 cable to the port on the bottom of the Apogee and into the port on the access point. And that's connected. And then at this point, we don't necessarily need to connect the RF cables because we're going to do the orientation. So those might get in the way because we're going to be twisting and turning the pole. So we don't want to do that quite yet, but we have them ready here to go. So inside of Apogee Manager, you're going to want to then access it, make sure you can see the Apogee. You'll see the red and the green lights on the bottom of the Apogee will light up because it has power. And you know your Apogee is good to go because you've already done the pre-configuration stage in the lab to get it to connect to the internet. So you know it's going to be there when you want to access it through Apogee Manager. You go into Apogee Manager, you use the precision tools that are located inside of the Apogee to orient it to north, to put it on the horizon, or basically 0 tilted out, because the Apogee is actually biased to the horizon. So you always want to have as close to 0 on the tilt as possible. And all those tools are located inside your Apogee Manager to help you. So you can either work as you're doing it up on the ladder, or you can have one person on the ladder and then be calling in and talking to somebody that's accessing it remotely from some other location. That's completely up to you, however you want to do it, but you need, obviously, internet access to do that. So we do it on our phones. We just come up to the Apogee. We're here. We'll look at the Apogee Manager, determine the orientation, twist it either clockwise or counterclockwise, depending on what Apogee Manager tells us. Once we have it at north, then we go into the tilt scenario. So usually what I like to do is I've got a bubble on my phone and I kind of pre-get it as close as possible so we're not making a lot of adjustments inside with Apogee Manager to the actual bolts. And then inside Apogee Manager, because again of those precision tools, you will get a very fine, down to a 1/10 of a degree location of where you are pointing towards the horizon. And in Apogee Manager, it will tell you which direction you need to tilt it. So there's 4 quadrants in the Apogee. The bolts are approximately at the middle of each of those quadrants. There's quadrant A through D. And then it will tell you inside of Apogee Manager if quadrant A and B are tilted up. That means you need to tilt it down as much as possible. There are a couple of different ways to do that, one of which is by loosening the bolts and then either pushing the Apogee forward if you need to tilt it down, or tilting the Apogee backwards if you need to tilt it up. And sometimes we found that you need to, use it a little catty corner and go. You're not necessarily going straight north or straight south. You're going kind of northeast or northwest. It all depends on how stable your mount was and how level that mount is. An Apogee will be as level as your mount is. So we've given you the ability to adjust it in a fine-tuned way with the bolts. And in order to do that, you really want to have a pole that's probably no bigger than either 1 inch, maybe 1.5 inches, if possible. We can accommodate up to a 2.5 inch pole, but we recommend for the fine-tuning that the pole is as thin inside the aperture as possible. 1 inch to 1.5 inches, we found you can get about 3 degrees of play by just playing with the bolts, and then you're not having to go and readjust your mount and realign your mount and re-level your mount, which is obviously going to take you a lot longer to do. So because of the precision tools inside of Apogee, because of the communication with Apogee and Apogee Manager, we're going to be able to allow you to do some of that functionality just by angling the apogee on the pole.